Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this morning, a webinar on the amendments. This is a CEN webinar, so if you're working on both CEN and CENELEC, please be aware that we're having a similar webinar this afternoon on the CENELEC amendments, so you can still register for that. My name is Els, and I will be moderating the webinar in the background, and I'm sitting together with a few of my colleagues here. So let me introduce them to you. Maybe first remind you that you're all muted, as you probably have noticed already. But you can use the Q&A panel to submit your questions should you have any questions. We are recording this webinar as well, so we'll make it available later today, and we'll share with you the link to the recording as well as the complete presentation. Should you be an ex, you can talk about the training, of course, with the hashtag training for standards, and you can find CEN and CENELEC with the handle standards for EU. So let's give the floor to my colleagues, Amy and Jens, who are sitting at the edge of the chair to introduce you with the CEN amendments. Thank you, guys. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Els. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar all about amendments. So in today's webinar, we will be talking about, firstly, how to get started with drafting an amendment. So we won't be talking too much about the procedure today, mainly focusing on the drafting, because we've noticed a few people have been having some trouble just keeping everything uniform. So we'll talk you through the new CEN boss page that's recently been published. We'll talk you through the simple template and its quick start guide so that you have much less work to do with the drafting. And then we'll offer you some drafting guidance too. We'll talk you through the inquiry and formal vote, a little bit about the procedure, what to expect, and the who, the what, the when, and the why, so what you can expect from all of that. And then we'll talk about the publication procedure with Jens. And then, as always, some final resources and information for you to remember. So let's get started. So we have some live demonstrations as well to keep things interesting today. But as always, you can find all of this information on the CEN boss. So it's mainly on the CEN boss, the preparation and submission of amendments page. So we've tried to keep it much the same as the regular template, where you can find the regular information for EN, TS, TR, that kind of thing. So we always go to reference material and then guidance documents and its preparation of amendments. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, it is nice and new. So you should be able to find it. But we'll take you there today. And we are going to take a look at the simple template and the quick start guide as well. So if we head over to the boss, so here's the CEN boss landing page, the splash page. So we're going to go over here to reference material on the right-hand side of the page, as normal. And we then go across to the left-hand page, we've got guidance documents right here. And as always, we're in drafting guidance. And we scroll, and we're right here. Preparation of amendments, and it's brand new, very recently published. We're going to click. And as you can see, it is very much like the preparation and submission of files page that we have for normal ENs, TSs, and TRs. So we can scroll through, we can see it takes you through to the link for that page, preparation and submission of files for a comprehensive list. We tell you what to provide, so a revisable Word and non-revisable PDF, exactly the same as a normal submission, and we give you a link to the template as well. We then tell you how to name it as well, because the naming for amendments is slightly different. So this time we need you to call it AN, with the X being the language number. So for E for English, F for French, D for German, as normal. And then if you've got a first amendment, it is A1, and a second amendment, A2. I don't suppose we've ever had a third amendment. I've never seen one. Yeah. But I guess if you can go up that high, you can choose A3, and so on. We'll give you some examples on how to name them as well. So that's what you need to provide. The exact same rules for the figure files apply as for regular submissions of regular ENs as well. So if you have figure files that you are modifying in any way, you need to provide us with a separate figure file for each one, as always. And then just some drafting guidance as well, just some regular drafting guidance. So the fact that you have to draft with the simple template now that we have it, it is obligatory. We have to also still apply IR3, but we'll talk a bit about that shortly. We tell you a little bit about the structure as well. We are going to go into this more in depth in the webinar itself, so I'm going to scroll past this. The European forward, the template has the forward template in there for you, so much less work for you to do. And then we have something on terminology. This is quite important as well. So the special terminology now for the headings. So modification to the scope, modification to clause 2, or any other clause in there, modification to clause X. And just make sure that you mention the title of the clause as well. That's quite important. Instructions, we have 3 instructions: replace, add, and delete. Again, we'll go into this in more detail shortly, just to show you that all of the information is in there, nice and clear, nice and simple. So we'll scroll through this, because we have all of these examples today. But do take a look at this in your own time. Go and explore it a little bit, click around, see what you can find. Yeah, and then we have our nice FAQ section at the end. That is actually frequently asked questions that we do get. So there we have it. So take a look through that. For now, we will take a look at the simple template, because this is new information for us. So in the same place, reference material, this time we want to go to forms and templates and technical work. And if we scroll down to the bottom, much where you can find the simple template, the regular one with the quick start guide, we also have the simple template for drafting amendments and a quick start guide too. We won't go through the quick start guide today, because I'm going to give you a quick start guide live, I guess. So we've downloaded this. It downloads as a Word document that you can then type straight into. And for those of you who are familiar with the normal simple template, this should be familiar to you. We've just made 1 or 2 modifications to it. So as you can see on the title page, we've got our reference, which you should already have, because this is just the publication reference. And then you're going to add, if it's a First Amendment, A1, and then the year. So fill out anything on here that's incorrect. Obviously, you should have your title, because you're modifying something that's already published. So you can pop that in as well. And as you can see, it's the exact same principle as with the normal simple templates. So it's very much plug and play. We like to call it plug and play. So we can see we've got the forward. So you very simply just type into this. We can put our date in too. Say this was published in 2012, maybe. Might be a bit early. A1. And it's coming to us this year. So you see, it's the exact same thing. We have our TC. Let's say it's TC, I don't know, 123. The title we can modify as well. And then Secretariat is held by, let's say, CEN. So it's the exact same principle as with the simple template. If we don't have a harmonized document, if it's not linked to a directive, we can simply delete this text. No problem whatsoever. But this is basically the amendment forward template. Nice and simple. So then moving on to the main body, one of the main things we can see is that there's no clause 1, 2, and 3 being the scope, normative reference, and terms and definitions. That's because you might not need to modify those. And obviously, if you don't need to modify them, you don't need to include them. We've got our instructions right here. So the modify, replace, add, delete, all of that. And we've got some notes for the drafters too. So we have put clause 2 as the normative references and clause 3 for terms and definitions, just to show you how to modify them, really. So if you need to add a reference, for example, you're adding any text at all, you're going to use add the following reference. If you want to delete something, you're going to tell us what we need to delete. And you're going to lay it out like this. So we can see this is italic, the instruction is italic, so add, this could also be replace, very simply like that. And then you put what you want to replace, add, or delete in these little punctuation marks right here. So we zoom in a tiny bit, you can see it a bit easier. Between quotation marks at the beginning and the end. And that'll tell the editor at the end, when we consolidate it, exactly what needs to change. Nice and simply. So it's very clearly laid out. Same thing with definitions. Obviously with the definitions, if you need to, you can be a bit more specific. So replace definition 3.1 with the following, or you might want to replace the whole thing. Just tell us what needs to be replaced. Try and keep it as simple as possible though. So if you're just replacing one word in the definition, don't replace the whole term. That's a bit silly. Just replace what needs to be replaced. We've then got some examples on add, replace, delete, title of clause. So this is just a regular clause. This could be clause, I don't know, clause 7, for example. We're going to put the title there, and we're going to go ahead with that. Then we've got some examples of figures. add tables as well with some notes to the drafters. So specifically for modifying tables, it's quite interesting because sometimes you just want to modify, for example, this cell right here, and we want to add maybe 1 in that one. So you just need to tell us that it is in the 3rd row down, so 1, 2, 3, and it's in the 1, 2, 3, 4th column across. And that is how you'll write it in table 1. So this is table 1. 5th row, so 1, 2, 3, we can't go to the 5th row. Let's pop the 5th row in there. 3rd column, so right here, replace 15 millimeters. We need to replace that with 20. Just like that. So you need to be very clear with where we need to go in this table, which cell we need to replace. If you are replacing all of this information in all of these cells, it might be worth just replacing the whole table, just to keep it simple. Because Jens will talk us through shortly about the tagging, and that can get quite messy if we have to tag every single one of these number 1s in here. Formulae, pretty self-explanatory. We've got add, replace, delete formula X. So this one would be formula X. Obviously, if it's not numbered, you need to be more specific with where the formula is. So if it's in clause 6.2 in paragraph 3, you can write that down. Add formula 1 in paragraph 3 of 6.2, something like that. Just keep it nice and simple. And then finally, annexes. So if you need to make any modification or add or delete an annex, very, very simply, you're going to add something, add the entire annex, or just add a simple clause, or replace, delete. Just keep it simple and keep it uniform. Then we've given you an example of an annex right here as well, just so that you can see, and then the annex heading at the end. If you don't need any of this, you can absolutely delete what you don't need. If there's any elements missing, you can add those in. And then at the end, the bibliography as well. So the same principle, always add, replace, delete, following references. Should be fairly straightforward. And we've tried to make it as easy for you as possible, just to keep it nice and simple and take away a lot of the burden of trying to make it look uniform, trying to make it look good. So download this, have a play with it, have a little type in there, take a look at the quick start guide, but it really is the same principle as for the regular simple template. So you shouldn't have any problems with the styling. If you want a deep dive on the styling, go back to the first webinar on the simple template. That still applies, but it should be very straightforward for you. And as always, if you want any live help from any of the editors here, just reach out and we can always talk you through it if you're really pulling your hair out with it. So if we go back to our presentation.
Amy, can I just interrupt? We got one suggestion to slow down the speech
and
to go slowly over images and text so people can really assimilate what you're showing. For those who are worried that the speed is too quick, please be assured that we're recording the webinar and we will share the presentation so you can listen back and review as well.
Of course. And as well, a lot of this is very much the same principle as with the simple template, the regular one as well. So we're trying not to sort of repeat too much the same information as well. But if you are still struggling with anything, just get in touch and we can help you out live. So as I've mentioned, the IR3 for amendments still applies. So the editor will still go in depth with IR3. We still check all of the elements, so you can't squeeze in any requirements in notes. We will absolutely find those out and we will remove them. We ask that you only modify that which needs to be modified as well. So as I said in the simple template, if you're modifying a single cell, you don't need to replace the entire table. If you're modifying a single word in a whole paragraph, you don't need to replace the whole clause. You just need to replace what is being modified. And keep it simple. Draft with the publication consolidation in mind. So if you've got many, many tiny little changes to make throughout a whole paragraph of text, try and consider how that will look in the final publication and how easy it is for the editor here to consolidate that as well. If it's very confusing for us, it's going to be difficult at the publication. It's going to take more time. We can introduce errors, that kind of thing. And we don't want to do that. So keep it as simple and as clear as possible. And if you use the template and the guidance on the boss and in this quick start guide, you can't go wrong. So clear and concise is the name of the game with this. Keep it nice and simple. So now what do I need to include in an amendment? What should go in? It goes without saying any significant technical changes. So by that we mean any modification, addition or deletion of technical content. So any requirements that you're changing, any recommendations, permissions, all of that sort of stuff, anything like that that you're changing needs to be included. If you're adding any new clauses, a new annex, a new figure, new table, new formula, anything like that, you need to include it as well. And for figures, just to note, if you do add any or you modify any, just make sure we have that updated figure file as well. We can't create those in-house, we can't modify them in-house, we rely on you to do that. So just make sure if you modify anything or you add anything that we have those figure files. But what don't you need to include? What can you leave out? So any kind of small editorial change. So where you're fixing a wording or you're fixing a spelling of something, you don't need to mention that. Any changes to the introductory wording as well. So if you have an older document that falls under the old IR3 and you want to update to the new IR3, so the new introductory wording, you don't need to put that in there. We can take a look at that and consider it. Any editorials in line with IR3 that are small, that don't impact the technical content, you can leave those out too. And anything that requires extensive tagging. So by that, we mean if you add a figure at the very beginning of the document, you've got 20 throughout, and we need to renumber all of that. You don't need in each clause to say, renumber figure 3 to figure 4, renumber figure 4 to figure 5, all the way through. You can just say in one instruction where you add the figure, you can just say, and renumber throughout, and that should be enough. The reason why we don't include these small editorial changes is just because sometimes if you're making small grammatical changes, it can be very, very messy to tag everything up. And we want to avoid that. We want the final product to be readable, to be nice and clear as well. So anything like this, it's not really impacting the technical content so much, so we don't really need to tag it. So as I mentioned in the simple template, clause 1, 2, and 3, they're not mandatory in the same way they are in a regular EN, in a TS, or a TR. So they're not the scope, normative references, or terms and definitions, unless those happen to be the clauses that you're changing. So obviously, if you're changing the scope, that will be clause 1. If you're changing the terms and definitions, that could be clause 2. But if you're changing the normative references as well, it would become clause 3. But it's not mandatory. That's the idea behind this point. And as we've also said, it is all in the wording. So really, you should be relying on the 3 main verbs, add, delete, and replace. Please don't be creative with anything else. Don't try to invent your own instructions. Just keep it nice and simple. Everybody knows where they stand with this. And then it should be clear for not just your CEN editor who has to consolidate this at the end, but also translators, members who use this at the end as well. So just keep it to those 3 verbs. Now Jens.
Yes, and when we invented this whole consolidation of text, so we invented it, in fact, not from zero. So we looked around where we could find something. And at that time, it was around 2005 to 2006, we noticed that BSI had some consolidation in place, and that we should continue the use of elements of the BSI tagging and the BSI consolidation, and also those elements that we wanted to bring in that were not in place. So there was a hybrid solution of using currently at that time existing system and the needs we needed for the consolidation, and we developed a first set of standardized wording instructions, but what we never really managed to make it public and to make it available to the members. This is what we tried today to catch up with, and also what the intention was of the recently published guidance document and template, to give more guidance to the drafters than in the past, because we have seen a lot of very diverting ways how amendments were drafted. And sometimes the different way of drafting, even within the same TC or sector, brought some confusion. that was really the idea to focus on very limited amount of instructions on a very easy to understand and to follow way of doing the changes and making them visible, and also to harmonize the way so that everyone in the system could easily get into the understanding and in the application of the whole thing. So for example, we based ourselves in the development on the principle of the old cut and paste, really like you would do on the paper. You cut out something and you glue in something else, or you cut something completely out, or you add something that was never there, but with the idea of really take a piece of something out and put another piece physically in. That was the idea. And we then developed this idea further from analog to digital. And now this was a bit the symbolics we put in the presentation, the scissor, and which later will become the tagging symbol. So you see, for example, in the first line, add changed from cut out physically to use tagging symbol and closing tagging symbol, and you see the text. The smiley text, by the way, replaces or adds that text that we all like, and the not so nice looking face is the text we are bored with or really don't need anymore. So that was a bit the idea of the presentation. So as less is more, as Amy already said, we historically decided to limit ourselves in the wording to make the cut and paste very much visible by using BSI's old tagging symbols, and to make also a discrepancy between or a difference between the instruction and the text to be changed. We decided to use all italics for the instructions and all upright and quotation or later tagging marks to be the text to be replaced, deleted, or added. Over the years, we have seen that this is very easy to detect for all involved, in particular because it was sometimes not very easy to see the difference between instruction and to be replaced text. And at the end, you see also a quote of ourselves. It may come as a surprise, but standardizing wording supports the key idea of standardization, which is standardized wording and expressions and instructions and the way of handling documents.
Okay, thank you, Jens. So now on to just a bit of timeframes. So again, I did mention in the very beginning, these are handled in the same way as ENs. So they follow the same time frame for those as well. So for example, inquiry, we still have our 5 week to edit the amendment text. It goes off to translation for 8 weeks, and then it goes to a ballot. So the inquiry opens for 12 weeks, exactly the same.
And we can say that 2 pages count the same time as 80 pages, in fact.
Exactly. So we always have the same amount of time. Same thing for formal votes. We've got 5 weeks to edit, regardless of the length of the text as well. Our translators still have 5 weeks to translate, and the ballot is still 8 weeks as well. So nice and simple. So some expectations. So what can you as drafters expect of the editors? So at the inquiry, so the first stage, you can expect the exact same thing as a regular EN. So we will in-depth edit and we will apply IR3. That means we read everything carefully, we check all of those things, that we check in regular ENs, TS, TR, all of that. We apply the styling, we create an XML file, and we prepare the whole package.
This means, by the way, that in cases of difficult and complex consolidations, we compare already an inquiry stage against the mother text. Mother text is not gender, is just a historical word we used for the text that is the original version to which we bring in the modifications. So we would then maybe even consult you at inquiry stage, not only on the content, but also on discrepancies when we would not understand, for example, an instruction, because it would not really fit with the main text.
Exactly, because one thing that we can't really change at publication stage is we can't change those instructions because it's considered technical content on its own. So we do just double check to make sure that what you've done actually exists. So if we're replacing a figure 1, for example, we check that there's actually a figure 1 in there. Because otherwise, we can't change it at publication stage. If we do make any changes, we do inform you that we made those changes to bring it in line with IR3. So yeah, we'll always be clear with our communication. So formal vote stage, much the same thing. Editing, in-depth editing, application of IR3.
And here we have an even higher focus on harmonized work because what is also important when we do consolidation, we have to be consistent with amendment and regulation or directive. So when we, for example, find that there is a replacement of a reference to be dated in a certain text, and we would find out, for example, that there's no instruction to update the document in clause 2, we would also need to bring in line with the instructions so that it's consistent to all places that apply.
And as always, again, we'll inform you if we do make any of these changes, we'll let you know that we've done it via email. No news is usually good news. So if you don't hear from us and you see that things are moving in projects online, that's usually a good sign.
But we are always open to questions. So if you're not really sure how to bring something in wording or what is the extent of a change, it's maybe even better now to ask an editor than that we would later to have to deal with that at publication stage.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked about what you can expect from us. We now have some expectations of you as drafters. So we expect you to provide good quality texts using the simple template. So Jens did just say that we do check what is in the original standard versus the amendment, but we do expect that you are checking that yourself in order to draft the amendment as well. You are the technical experts, we are not, so we rely on you for that. Also, those clear and concisely drafted instructions in the amendment as well. So don't be too confusing, don't be too problematic with it, keep it nice and clear. And if we do have any questions for you, if we do write to you, just reply in a timely manner. If it's not clear, if we need something from you, you can always just say, like, do you need anything from me? Do I need to do anything? But do respond in a timely manner. And if you do go on holiday or if there is a holiday period, Christmas is coming up, anything like that, just warn us and let us know that you are away or that you will be away, something like that.
And this is in particular important for drawings that change because we in CCMC have not the means and the possibilities, and it is also a member's responsibility to revise figures. So figures are sometimes a little bit a problem. So in this time, we need to count in some time for the drafters to deliver new figures. Exactly.
But the most important thing is that you use the text edited by CCMC at each stage. So for formal vote stage, you have to use the text that we edit at inquiry stage. Can be quite tempting to start the work once we've edited it, and sort of once you've submitted it to us, immediately start working on that formal vote draft. But please make sure that you write to us at least and get the text we've edited before you do that. Just make sure that all of our edits are retained. It makes sure any styling that we've done is retained. Makes the whole procedure a lot easier and a bit cleaner as well.
And normally it is the obligation from the members to deliver the correct text. But please, if there's any problem and you have difficulties to get this text, come to us, because it is for us even easier to share the text than that we would need to redo document editing because we have not the latest version in place. At publication stage, we cannot change, and in earlier stages, in particular for harmonized work, we have seen that we sometimes have multiple times to re-edit the original text because the latest version was not used. Thank you.
Oh, it's not going ahead. There we go.
Yeah, the chameleon question comes up. Here are some elements that are very specific to publication. So we called it the mystery of the VI magic, which is the work item question, and chemical document transmutation. So it sounds a bit weird in the beginning, but we will now explain what we mean by that. The mystery of the VI magic. So the work item of the main standard, which is what we called in the past mother standard, is the standard that is currently the published one, will be closed. Then we have the work item of the inquiry and formal vote, which is at a certain time the procedure that goes on, the voting, the public inquiry, the second vote, whatever. But all these stages, we have a dedicated work item that is accompanied to the inquiry and formal vote version. This one will be discontinued at the publication stage. So we have one closed, one discontinued. But to make these two become a document under a work item, there was no other way to solve this database-wise in the past than introducing a new work item, which is the magically appearing new work item that was never allocated, that was never there, which we then just allocate to continue the final publication. So there is the original main standard, which is the currently still published one. This one gets closed. It is revised, but it's not really a revision. It is a revision in the database, but it is a closed work item. But the main is not a revision of a standard. So this is sometimes difficult to understand. The original main standard gets closed, gets somehow revised, but it is not a full revision. It's an amendment of a not revised standard, but the work item gets visible as revised. Then the amendment to the main standard gets discontinued and closed and looks like no more active also in the database. And then the consolidated original main standard, including the amendment text, will become a new work item, merging the two formerly existing work items to a new one, but not being a revision. So we explain this later. So it is a revised work item, but the main is not a revised standard, but a new version of the standard. And this we called a chemical document transmutation, which is the main standard will be withdrawn so not revised, it will be withdrawn. The inquiry or formal vote will become an instruction sheet, so it is no longer an inquiry and formal vote text, so it will become just an instruction text for the members, translators, whoever uses this whole document to make the final new publication. So the instruction sheet will have a changed title page, will have a changed header. It will no longer contain a foreword, and it will become an informative document. So it is not a reference document. The new consolidated text will be the new version of the current edition. So this is why we had to explain that this is not a real revision. It's only a new version of the current edition. So for example, if this main standard is now amended, it becomes the second version of the current main. If it is twice amended, it becomes the third version of the main. If it's 3 times amended, it becomes the fourth version of the main. Oh, no, stop. Because the rules only allow 3 amendments per main, and if there is a new need, so then the only way is now to go to a real revision of the standard. Then the whole process have to be starting on an inquiry of a full new standard. So we often get questions on the 5 years review obligation. That's why we need to explain this as well a little bit. So the 5-year review obligation is not affected by an amendment. There is no difference because the review is always linked to the main. So it is related to the main, which is related to an edition. As an amendment is only a new version of the current edition, there is no change in the review obligation. So this means the amendment and the amended text does not alter the count of the 5-year review obligation. So the 5-year review obligation is fixed to the main, and you know the warning system that is in place to remind technical committees to start the review is based on that date, and the editors have to ensure manually at the publication stage that we not use the review date based on the amendment text, but take over the review text originally applied to the main standard. So review is not the same as a revision because the review can have 3 different outcomes. One outcome can be to revise the standard. The second could be to confirm the standard, which of course is not possible for an amendment because it would be not possible to change a document and confirm it. And the third one is the withdrawal of a standard, which would be the complete deletion of the project. So the conclusion is projects online can only mirror what the editors put in, and we have to continue the count from the main. So we care for these data, and together with our database handling colleagues, and there's one specificity would be if an main standard start of review would be in the past from the moment of publication. We will not talk about this, but if this happens, we have to manage this manually out of the database because it could be a great confusion. So the history and the basics of the tagging symbols. So this was developed by BSI, one of our members. The IPR is with BSI. So we as CCMC cannot just share them to whoever asks for them. So we received the grant of use, but the installation of this tagging symbols needs to be done by the members because we have no insight how it is dealt between the members and BSI. So there's a specific font style that needs to be installed on each computer. Otherwise, the computer cannot identify this font and then cannot correctly represent the font. Currently, it is BSSimp 10, but also BSSimp 9 is still possible and supported. There's no such real difference between the last two versions of this symbol font. But if you have an older version, not all taggings are supported, for example. So it's very important to have the correct font installed on your computer, supported by Word. Otherwise, you will have incorrect tagging. How does it look if it's correctly installed? Yeah, you see the tagging symbols, for example, opening tagging A1, amendment 1, closing tag A1. But if it's not installed, for example, we see regularly that there's a quotation mark and exclamation mark. So this means text that when we see that, it is corrupted, in fact. And once it is corrupted, it cannot be recovered. So we could not just load this document and to a computer which supports the tagging, it would not see it. So we would have to manually replace all taggings throughout the document. Once corrupted, opened not in the correct font support, it will remain corrupted.
And that is a very good reason why we ask you to keep it simple as well and only tag what you really, really need to change instead of trying to tag many, many things throughout. So just some final words, because that is the end of the technical content that we have for you today. So just some information and resources to leave you with. If you're still really struggling and you think, help, I've watched the webinar, I've read the BOSS and the Quick Start Guide, but amendments are still very confusing. You can get in touch with us. So if you're not sure if you've applied a rule correctly, anything like that, if you don't have an editor that you can contact directly, you can always contact production at CENELEC.eu and our production colleagues will connect you with an editor. If you do have an editor, for example, you're talking to me, Amy Jayne, you're talking to Jens, or any of our other colleagues, editors, contact them directly and they can help you. We all have this knowledge, so we can all help you out. And if you have any questions specifically about today's webinar, anything we've not covered, something didn't quite make sense, I know we went through some elements quite fast and quite quickly. So if something wasn't so clear, you can always contact myself or Jens directly. You have our emails on screen. Just send us an email and we'll happily reply in the fastest delay. Finally, ask your editors. So if there's any elements that you want us to check, if you've drafted something, you're not quite sure if you've done it correctly, we can always check paragraphs or clauses for you. We can offer you live guidance as well. We can be in TC meetings, drafting meetings, either on Teams or in Zoom, or even if you're in CCMC, we can always pop down and see you in person as well. We quite like to do that sometimes. But we are here to help. Editors, we are friends as well. We're not foes, so we're here to help you and guide you as best we can.
Editors are kind of tightrope walkers between creating creative writing and standards wording, and sometimes even not removers. We've put this in as a positive final remark because we see really complicated instructions, and so sometimes we would like to help you to ease the instructions, or to sometimes even find the solution for attacking, because it can be sometimes not so obvious how to attack something. Amy told already about the tagging of changes in complex tables or elements in a figure, because not everything is supported then later by XML. We need to be careful to not build something that is not, for example, supported by the XML. For example, if we would put a tagging in the beginning of a paragraph into the title and we would not put a space before, we would have incorrect representation in the XML. This is very specific, but it's just some of the elements we cannot solve. So there are the mysteries of the IT that need some workarounds, and we have now a collection of ideas how to do it. So don't struggle too much. Ask us, and we will find advice.
Exactly.
So thank you, sorry, thank you, Jens and Amy, for this interesting overview. We had the luck to have Gonzalo today with us. He replied already many questions. There's still a few questions open, but before we go to the open questions, I would like to launch a feedback poll to the attendees. So it's a short poll with 3 questions asking you your feedback on this webinar. We use the replies to improve our webinars in the future. So if the attendees can all take some minutes to reply these questions, that would be wonderful. And then maybe Amy Jayne take a few minutes, and Jens as well, of course, to go through the open questions.
Maybe I take the first one. So if it this really the question is, if the bibliography is in order of appearance and you add a new reference in middle of the list, will you reorder the rest of the list, or should I reorder the whole bibliography? So in fact, first of all, the editors do the work. So you don't need to reorder the bibliography, and we would need to look at how the bibliography is drafted and linked, how they are linked into the text. If you, for example, we see this quite often in technical reports, have a very lot of references, and in the text you have made very specific bracket references to the bibliography, and we add one in the first place of the list, we would destroy all the cross-reference linking. So we would then add it at the end. And if, for example, you have not done the cross-referencing in the text by using the specific reference number bracket, then we would just update it and sort it ourselves. It really depends on how the text is currently styled and what is the least impact. And the final sorting can always be done in the next review, in the next revision of the text. So it is just an optical issue. If it's easy to be done, we do it straight.
Exactly. So I will take the next one. So if the amendment is related to clause 3, where some terms are modified, do we have to specify that term X replaces Y in each clause? So with terms and definitions, if you modify, for example, term 3.3, depends on how much exactly you need to modify. If you're adding something in, you don't need to mention that we need to renumber every single term. You can just simply put renumber the remaining terms, but you won't need to say renumber clause 3.4 to 3.5 and 3.5 to 3.6. It gets very messy. It's a bit silly to do. It's not necessary. So you can simply write add term 3.3 and renumber the remaining terms throughout. That is sufficient. If you're simply replacing something, you can just write replace term 3.3 as follows. That will be enough as well. With something like this, if you're not sure what you've done is correct or efficient, you can always send us the text to take a look at, and we can just put you on the right track if you're not already there. But I think in your question, it sounds like you're on the right track, to be honest.
And here also, Amy, is what we see as the original text.
Yeah.
We have so many different ways how this is drafted. For example, in testing standards, we have a lot of cross-references. In some, we have no cross-references at all. So it really depends on the text.
Yeah, exactly. The main point is just to be clear with it, be clear with what needs to be changed, and be concise as well. With it. So the next one, in the consolidated version, PDF, you cannot find the amended clauses. So those arrows, those taggings that Jens showed us, using Control and F. However, finding those would be helpful. That is a very good point. I agree, finding those would be helpful. But I don't think we have a way to search for them, because as Jens showed us on the way that the tagging can get corrupted, behind it, I guess there's the exclamation point and the quote marks.
Yes.
So if you search for quote marks and you have a few quotes within, it's not really going to show you. But maybe that's something we can send to BSI for some feedback, maybe? What do you think, Jens?
Yeah, so anyway, the overuse of tagging symbols is a real issue. That's why we advised, in particular in the PDF, it can look very messy. So finding the right balance between over tagging and sufficient tagging, and not to replace only what is to be replaced, it's a little bit a balance. So we have to balance out, but an over tagging is always problematic to find something. Even optically, it's very difficult. But I cannot really answer finally the question, because how to find this? We are not looking at it, in fact.
Yeah, and I don't think there is a way for us to find it, to find them anyway. But yeah, if we keep it simple in the amendment text, you can usually use them side by side. I think that's the main intention. But we consolidate officially to make it easier for people to use the final result. But certainly that is something we can maybe raise with BSI. We can send them some feedback and see if there's anything they can do with the font. Certainly.
We need to find an answer for that, because we not really have used it, but it could be helpful, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. But I think that's all of the open questions we have so far.
Correct, that was the last question. So if people did not yet reply to the poll, it's still open, so please feel free to do so. The more answers we have, the better, so we can improve our webinars in the future. I think there's one more last slide, Amy.
Yes.
That is just reminding people to submit questions should you have any, but also listing for you the upcoming webinars. So should you be working on some of these topics, it might be interesting for you to join us as well. All webinars are for free, but we ask you to register beforehand. So as promised, I will share with you this presentation and the recording, so you can have a look and click on the links if you would like to register. So I think we can close down the webinar here. Thank you very much, Amy and Jens, and as well Gonzalo, for having answered all the questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And hopefully see you next time. Bye-bye.